In the heart of the African savanna, where the laws of survival are ruthless and unforgiving, something happened that defied everything we know about the wild. A forest ranger collapsed unconscious right in the middle of lion territory, vulnerable, defenseless, completely at the mercy of nature's most feared predators. But instead of attacking, the lions did something no human could have expected. What they did next shocked everyone who heard this story and changed one man's life forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our most powerful and emotional stories. The blazing African sun pressed down like a furnace, the dry winds offering no relief as they swept across the endless grasslands. David Carter, a seasoned ranger assigned to Tanzania's remote Mkomazi Reserve, had set out before dawn. His mission was routine: search the southern boundary for signs of poachers, but by midday, the heat had become unbearable. David's canteen had run dry, and with every step, the ground beneath him seemed to tilt and sway. His vision blurred. His heart pounded painfully in his chest. He pressed on, determined to finish his patrol. But his body had other plans. Just beyond the ridge of a dried-out riverbed, his legs gave way. He collapsed face first into the dust, unconscious before he hit the ground. Time became meaningless. Then the faint tremble of heavy paws disturbed the stillness. From the tall grasses they emerged, a pride of lions, 4 lionesses, their golden coats shimmering under the brutal sun, and behind them the alpha. He was massive. His thick, dark mane carried the scars of countless battles. His name was known among the rangers, Bakari, the Protector. Bakari approached cautiously, his eyes locked onto the unmoving figure lying helpless in his territory. By every law of the wild, this was the end. But instead, something remarkable happened. Bakari lowered his massive head and sniffed David's body. Instead of seeing prey, he seemed to sense something else. Weakness, yes, but also trust. He lay down beside the unconscious man, his massive body settling protectively close. One by one, the lionesses followed. They didn't attack. They didn't threaten. They stood guard. For hours, under the unforgiving sun, these apex predators formed a living shield around a vulnerable human being. And just as the sun began to set, something even more unthinkable happened. As the golden light of the African sunset washed over the savanna, David stirred. His mind was slow to catch up, his senses dulled by dehydration and exhaustion. But then, he felt it. A deep, vibrating rumble, close, too close. His eyes fluttered open. For a moment, he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Inches from his face, a massive lion's head rested quietly, amber eyes watching him with what seemed like calm curiosity. David's heart hammered in his chest. Instinct screamed at him to move, to flee. But his body was too weak, and his mind fought to believe the impossible scene unfolding before him. Around him, the pride sat in a perfect circle. The lionesses stood like silent sentinels, their gazes sweeping the open plains as if guarding him from unseen dangers. And Bakari, the mighty alpha, was right there, close enough for David to feel the slow, powerful breaths rolling from the lion's chest. This wasn't an attack. It wasn't even a warning. It was protection. David fought to stay conscious, his cracked lips forming a dry whisper. Why are you doing this? As if understanding his words, Bakari lifted his massive head and pressed his forehead gently against David's shoulder. A gesture so human, so impossibly tender, it brought tears to the ranger's eyes. But the most shocking moment was yet to come. From the tall grass behind them, distant human voices echoed. Poachers. The very threat David had set out to stop. The lionesses snapped to attention, their bodies low and tense, ears flicking toward the sounds. Bakari rose to his full, terrifying height. He let out a low, guttural growl that rolled across the plains like distant thunder. And then, without hesitation, the lions moved. Bakari and his pride advanced toward the source of the threat, disappearing into the grass like golden shadows, their mission clear: protect what they had silently claimed as their own. David lay there, weak and trembling, watching as the kings and queens of the wild stood between him and the deadly intentions of his own kind. And in that moment, he realized he hadn't just been spared. He had been adopted. Minutes felt like hours as David lay helpless under the fading light. Every muscle in his body screamed for water, for strength, but his heart was focused only on the sounds coming from the tall grass. There were muffled voices now, harsh and urgent. Then silence. Suddenly, a roar shattered the quiet like a thunderclap. Bakari's voice echoed through the plains, powerful and commanding. David forced himself up onto one elbow, straining to see through the tall grasses. Another roar followed, this one answered by the unmistakable shrieks of panicked men. Gunshots rang out, 2, maybe 3, but they were distant and erratic. The poachers hadn't expected this. They came prepared for defenseless animals, not to face a fully united pride led by a legendary alpha. The minutes dragged on until finally, the grass shifted near the clearing. Bakari emerged first. His massive frame moved with regal calm, not a single sign of fear or hesitation. His golden mane was darkened by the shadows, his face lit by the dying glow of the sun. Behind him, the lionesses appeared, their movements graceful and silent. There were no wounds, no signs of injury, but there was something else. Clenched between the jaws of one lioness was a strip of torn fabric, part of the clothing worn by the fleeing poachers. A message left in plain sight: don't come back. Bakari approached David one last time. The mighty lion stood tall, his eyes meeting David's exhausted, awe-filled gaze. Slowly, with a quiet dignity only a true king could possess, Bakari lowered his head once more and pressed it gently to David's shoulder. And then, without a sound, he turned and disappeared into the night with his pride, their silhouettes fading into the vast savanna. David lay back in the grass, tears welling in his eyes. He had been saved, not by his fellow men, but by the wild itself, by lions who understood loyalty, protection, and mercy far better than those who claimed to rule over them. As the stars blanketed the night sky, David whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, my kings." And somewhere far beyond his sight, a final roar echoed through the night, a farewell and a promise. The night stretched endlessly over the savanna, each hour colder and darker than the last. David's body trembled from dehydration and exhaustion, but his mind remained fixed on what had just happened. He had faced death, twice in a single day. First from the unforgiving wilderness, then from the hands of poachers. And yet, it wasn't his fellow rangers or any human savior who had stood between him and the end. It was the lions. As dawn approached, a faint mechanical hum broke through the stillness of the night. Headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the darkness. It was the search team. David managed to lift one arm, signaling weakly before collapsing back into the grass. Moments later, strong hands lifted him onto a stretcher. Dr. Amina Ndur knelt beside him, her face tight with concern. "David, can you hear me?" she called softly. His cracked lips barely moved. "The lions. What about them?" she asked, leaning closer. They saved me." Her eyes filled with confusion, then something close to awe, as she realized the truth in his voice. Back at the field hospital, after receiving fluids and treatment, David recounted the entire story to the rescue team and the reserve leadership. But the story didn't end there. Later that afternoon, when rangers returned to the site to gather evidence of the poacher's presence, they found something astonishing. Near the clearing, deep claw marks were etched into a fallen tree, clear signs of a confrontation, and nearby, left deliberately on the ground, was a blood-stained strip of cloth wrapped around the broken handle of a poacher's rifle. But what struck them most was a single, undeniable sight. On the highest ridge overlooking the area stood Bakari, alone. He watched as the rangers gathered below, his massive silhouette proud and unmoving against the rising sun. Then, as if offering a final message, he turned his head toward them, released a low, powerful roar that echoed through the valley, and disappeared once more into the wild. That day, every ranger who heard the story and every person who witnessed the tracks left behind knew one thing for certain. Bakari hadn't just saved a man's life. He had reminded the world that even in the wildest hearts, mercy still lives. Days passed, but the echoes of that unforgettable encounter remained etched in David's mind. Though his body was recovering, his spirit felt changed. Back at the reserve, news of his miraculous survival spread quickly. Journalists, wildlife experts, and even government officials wanted to hear his story. But no matter how many times he told it, one question haunted him. Why did Bakari and his pride choose to protect me instead of killing me? Unable to find peace, David set out to search for answers. This time, he wasn't on patrol. He was on a personal mission to find Bakari. One last time. With Dr. Amina Ndawer by his side, they tracked the pride using everything they knew about Bakari's patterns. But the old lion was elusive, always one step ahead, until one misty morning, near a rocky outcrop known by the locals as the King's Rest, they found something that stopped them both in their tracks. Fresh paw prints. David's heart pounded as he followed the trail, and then, emerging from the fog, he saw him. Bakari stood alone atop the outcrop, his thick golden mane blowing gently in the wind. But this time, something was different. Bakari looked weaker, his posture lower than before. His powerful body bore new scars, and his breath came slower. David's chest tightened. He knew what this meant. Bakari's reign as king of the savannah was coming to an end. Slowly, David approached, stopping a respectful distance away. Bakari turned his massive head and locked eyes with the man he had once protected, and then, in a moment that David would remember for the rest of his life, Bakari took a final, deliberate step forward and did something no wild lion had ever done before. He lay down directly in front of David, bowed his great head low, and released a final, soft exhale, as if offering his trust completely. One last time. It was a silent farewell, and a transfer of guardianship. Bakari, the great protector, was saying his final goodbye. David fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "You saved me. Now I'll protect your legacy," he whispered through trembling lips. As the sun broke through the clouds and bathed the savannah in light, Bakari rose one final time, his powerful frame silhouetted against the dawn. Without a sound, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the horizon, leaving his mark not only on the land, but on a man's soul forever. Weeks later, as the dry season approached its peak, the savannah prepared for yet another cycle of hardship and survival. But for David, nothing would ever be the same. The encounter with Bakari had awakened something deep within him, a calling stronger than any duty he had ever known. With the help of Dr. Amina Ndawer and the local conservation authorities, David launched a bold initiative, the Bakari Legacy Project, a program dedicated to protecting the remaining prides in the region, ensuring that no lion sacrifice would ever be forgotten and no cub would grow up without a future. But before he could begin this new chapter, there was one final journey he had to make. David set out alone to find Bakari one last time. Deep down, he feared the worst, that the mighty king had passed quietly into the wild, unseen and uncelebrated. He spent days combing the ridges, the dry riverbeds, the shaded groves where Bakari had once ruled. Just as he was about to give up, he found the tracks. Large, unmistakable, though slower, more labored than before. Following them to the crest of a familiar hill, David stopped in his tracks. There, lying beneath the great acacia tree where their story had truly begun, was Bakari. His body rested peacefully in the shade, eyes closed, his massive chest no longer rising. But even in death, he looked regal, his mane glowing softly in the golden light of the setting sun. David fell to his knees, his vision blurred by tears. With a heavy heart, he whispered, "Rest well, old friend. Your legacy will live forever." And as if the earth itself heard his vow, a warm breeze swept through the savannah, stirring the grass and lifting the dust into a golden spiral that danced toward the horizon, where Bakari's spirit would roam free forever. From that day forward, every patrol David led, every rescue he made, every life he saved, was done in Bakari's name. And somewhere in the hearts of all who heard the story, a simple truth lived on. Sometimes the wildest hearts teach us the most about loyalty, courage, and mercy. If this story touched your heart, remember, true kings are not measured by the power they hold, but by the compassion they show. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes in the unbreakable bond between humans and the wild. Together, let's keep these legacies alive.